This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, West, and Chris back in the Herndon Chevrolet studios today. Certainly enjoyed being out at the Firehouse Subs in Newberry yesterday. Thanks to all you that did come out and see us. Also enjoyed listening to the conversation Chris had with Jalen Nichols in the last hour for a rescheduled Garnet Trust Hour. And we'll have another one coming up tomorrow with Michi Johnson as well. And Chris, a lot to unpack from that hour. Jalen Nichols, man of few words, likes to let his actions do the talking, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, Jalen's definitely an interesting kid and doesn't talk a lot. Tyler, you and I were talking off the air. He had mentioned that when he first got to campus, it's kind of a funny story. He said he literally didn't talk to anybody for like 2 weeks. He just sat there. He just kind of did workouts.
Went about his business.
Went about his business. And this is the opened up version of Jalen Nichols, actually. So the other version, I guess, even more quiet. Like literally, you remember how Devin Taylor was nicknamed "Don't Say Nothing" when he got to USC? Like some of his teammates nicknamed him that. Same type of deal for Jalen Nichols. But enjoyed talking with him, and I think one thing the Gamecock fans may want to know about is the knee, and we didn't really get into, a firm timeline or anything like that. Obviously, with him being injured in mid-April, sustaining that knee injury, that's right at the end of spring. Not a great timeline in terms of, projecting to be able to come back during the season. You do see guys come back and, if they tear knee ligaments sometime in the spring. Every now and then you do see some guys come back at some point during the season. I don't know if that's a fair expectation here, though. The knee is doing well. He's not running or anything, but he's walking around fine. There's actually not even a brace on it or anything like that. So he's doing well. And I know we talked about yesterday, guys, out at Firehouse Subs in Newberry. It's a big loss, when you just look at not only taking away a starter, but dipping into your depth. But Jalen is pretty high on this team. He thinks, and we've heard this from a lot of guys, that they're going to surprise some people this coming season.
And obviously the hope would be that Nichols could come back before the end of the season, but you did bring up a good point towards the end of the last hour in that he does still have a 6th year of eligibility if he chooses to use that because of the COVID season. Yeah,
Jalen, he's actually had a couple other injuries, during his Gamecocks career. But, looking back during his career, I actually had kind of forgotten a couple of just kind of his trajectory. He came in as a true freshman and played pretty quickly. I remember he got thrown in there against Georgia, and he played against Kentucky, played against Tennessee. So he played multiple games. Actually played more as a true freshman right out of high school than he did the following season. The following year, he was mostly a special teams guy. So his development's been interesting. He's played right tackle. He's played guard. He's played left tackle. Likes left tackle. Actually said his favorite, I think he said, was right tackle, but he's been playing left tackle a lot. Wasn't ready at all by his own admission, year one. But it's someone that has, a lot of experience for this team, and that's one reason why it's a pretty significant loss not to have him.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talked about it. I think that's a massive loss for South Carolina. He kind of settled into left tackle last year. Like, he's a guy that has played all over. I liked him at guard as well. I think, you start thinking next level. It'll be interesting to see where he would be, inside or outside as far as that goes. But I think kind of down the stretch, not that the offensive line was perfect, but, when they had Nichols there at left tackle and they had Ja'Kai at left guard, that kind of, put South Carolina in a position to play their best on offense down the stretch. So I think that those things kind of lined up a little bit with the overall offensive line play. And we talked about it yesterday, guys. I just think losing, kind of chipping into your depth right off the bat is not something any offensive line coach wants to deal with. And, just losing that experience too. I mean, that's the thing. You lost a lot of experience off of this group, but you had a lot of offensive line experience coming back, with Jalen being one of those guys. And, kind of, obviously, I think a lead by example guy, but, I think that's something, if that would be a huge bonus if they were able to get him back at some point during the season. And then he's going to have a really big decision to make for himself, because most guys don't, especially playing a physically demanding position like offensive line, a lot of guys don't come back, for, y'all said it would be sixth year. I mean, I lose count. That's something I used to be able to just rattle off. I could tell you if a guy was a junior, a redshirt sophomore, I could rattle it off like off the top of my head. Now, I mean, there's so many different designations for guys because of COVID years and red shirts and all this stuff. But it's hard to play college ball for 6 years, honestly, at a physically demanding position. However, he may look at it and say, man, I need to just come back and have one great final season, completely healthy, and, show everybody as far as the next level what I can do. But, of course, we're getting way ahead of ourselves with that conversation.
Absolutely. And if you missed any of that interview with Jalen Nichols, I have it up shortly on the 107.5 The Game podcasting page. You did mention at the end of the hour there when you talked a little bit more of the off-the-field stuff, sounds like he's an aspiring real estate mogul.
Yes. Wes Mitchell, would you like to sit down with Jalen and talk to him about that? He has a lot of projects, like mechanic, I guess. He actually showed me his car. Some of the stuff that he's done inside is pretty neat. Has some lights going on in there.
Nice.
But apparently he can do a lot of mechanical stuff that I would be clueless on.
Well, I'll help him with the real estate management game if he can just kind of help me with my car.
He was like, well, I just took apart my car one day. I just felt like I just took it apart, put it back together.
He can pimp your ride.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a throwback.
But he's got that. He's got the real estate that he's working on. What else did he have, Tyler?
There's one more thing. I'm trying to remember what it was.
There was one more thing that Jalen had going on. Pretty crazy. It was building. I don't know. He's a builder now.
An interesting character, to say the least.
Yes, he is.
I mean, I respect anybody that can build stuff and tear stuff down and actually be able to put it back together.
Yeah.
Never had any problem tearing stuff up, but being able to put it back together and it worked, that's an impressive skill, man. So I respect that.
And again, thanks to Jalen Nichols for hanging out for the Garnet Trust Hour. And again, I'll have that up shortly on the 107.5 The Game podcasting page. Coming up next, we'll jump back into recruiting. Jonathan Paylor released his top 5 yesterday. We'll break that down coming up next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
All right, guys. It is Wednesday. Chris Clark, do you know what that means?
Of course.
What is it?
That's another sub of the day.
But what sub of the day is it? It's the New York Steamer. That's my number one on the power rankings right now. Hammered a couple of those yesterday. Again, appreciate Larry and all the great crew at Firehouse Subs for hosting us there in Newberry. Had a great time as always, hey, you can get the sub of the day yourself as well. That's $7.99 for a medium. That's $5.99 for a small. But guess what? You don't need the small. Go ahead. Go with the medium. Throw whatever you want on that thing. You can build it however you want, or just go with the classic New York Steamer, which, again, is my favorite sub right now. Hit that rapid rescue online at firehousesubs.com, or possibly even easier is to download the app, save all your information in there. You can type in what you want. It's going to be waiting for you on the shelf. Again, sub of the day today, New York Steamer, $7.99 medium. Go check them out. Lunch is coming right up. Firehouse Subs is a great place to get your lunch and get a deal today as well.
What does Jonathan Paylor's top 5 look like? We'll talk about that next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
To see how big stages it is at the SEC, and to know that like Coach Pete Limbo, to know he really keeps contact with me throughout school and everything like that.
That was the voice of Jonathan Paylor about a year ago at a camp, just talking about several schools that were interested in him at that point in time, touching a little bit on South Carolina in that little quote right there. And obviously he was one of several guys that was on campus over the weekend for the big official visit, him being the 4-star wide receiver prospect out of Burlington, North Carolina. And yesterday on his Twitter, he officially released his top 5, that being South Carolina, North Carolina, NC State, Maryland, and Penn State, with a tentative commitment date set for the end of the month, the end of next month, on July 28th.
How about my Penn State pick, Wes? What'd you think?
For making the top 5?
That's right.
Yeah, not bad. I didn't realize actually until I started diving in when I was writing my pre-write for his top 5. He actually OV'd to Maryland as well, so they ended up making the cut. And but really, I mean, this is I sort of deem this the kind of official top 5, but we already kind of knew what the top 5 were. And
at least 3 of them, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew what the top 3 are, and really probably, Chris, know what the top 2 are, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Gamecocks, NC State look to be in the best position. The other one that, seemed to be in there is North Carolina. Maryland and Penn State in the mix as well. This is another interesting one. I mean, this would be an opportunity to get a player that you've been on for a while, and really, despite only being to campus, probably 3 times, Wes, in total, this official visit this past weekend, it was the latest visit after kind of a long layoff. Paylor had not been to South Carolina in a while. There's some other, NC State he's been to more often, I think it's closer, so there's some reasons for that. But Jonathan Paylor's liked South Carolina the most for quite a while, it seems like. And so I think just getting him back on campus to reinforce that was pretty significant. You have an opportunity to, I think, do a few different things here. Number one, you can troll Maryland by beating them on another prospect, which is always funny and enjoyable for Gamecock fans now. But on a more serious note, I mean, you're landing a 4-star prospect who has a unique skill set. Again, to go back to Charles Power from On 3, his description of Jonathan Paylor, lightning in a bottle, and so getting a guy that has some return ability, who can play in the slot or outside probably for you, who's really good in space, who brings some speed, continuing to upgrade that team speed, be a really good get. And then, another little subplot in this, we've talked about this recently, South Carolina has been getting shut out in the state of North Carolina really the past couple recruiting cycles. And so you're not going to see, I don't think you're going to see a bunch of activity from North Carolina prospects in this 2024 class. But getting back in that state where you've landed so many good players in the past, I think is something you'd really like to do as long as it's a really good player. And so I think Paylor checks that box too.
Yeah, man, I think just continuing to potentially add this type of speed. I mean, this guy with verified track speed, and somebody that has the the track. Like he actually excels on the track. Like I think track's not just something. Some guys do it just for other sports purposes, like because they want to get faster, they want to stay in shape, all those things. I mean, I think this kid's a bona fide track guy. Maybe even, I think if you're Tim Hall, you probably have the conversation with him. There are several guys on the South Carolina football team right now, other than even Nick Harbor, who are doing both sports. And, Paylor's probably that good as far as that side of things as well. But I think it speaks to his speed. Man, we talked about South Carolina kind of being in a position where you'd think they want to kind of upgrade the team speed. I thought that was a huge priority for Beamer when you just looked at the overall roster that he took over a couple of years ago. And, not that speed is everything, but certainly I think when you put a team out there that lacks it, you can see that. And, I think Paylor continues to potentially add to that, assuming they are able to land him. North Carolina's been in it, but it's mainly, like we said, it's been South Carolina, NC State. NC State has done everything in their power. They're probably beating their heads up against the wall at this point. I don't know if you can ever completely count them out because they are the in-state. He's been there more than anywhere else by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah.
But, even the NC State guys, they're on 3, Ethan McDowell, who I've become friends with, does a fantastic job covering their recruiting. He kind of put in his prediction for South Carolina. And I asked him if that was just anything new or just reading the tea leaves. He, said just reading the tea leaves from everything that's going on there. But Paylor really has called South Carolina his favorite for some time. He didn't. We're close enough to the potential announcement that he's not naming any top 1, top 2 at this point. But I think safe to say South Carolina coming off that visit is in that position. They just got to close it out.
Well, and there's a little bit of a subplot here that I think hasn't been talked about enough when we're talking about wide receiver recruiting. There's been so much focus on the edge position for this year and beyond, the running back position for this year and beyond, and then some people even looking forward to life after Spencer Rattler at quarterback, right? And you have some answers there because you'll possibly have Luke Doty back. You'll have Lenore Sellers, right, after Rattler moves on. But you start to dive into wide receiver, Wes, and you look at how backloaded this team is with their contributors at wide receiver, the guys that are going to be playing the most for him. You got Juice Wells. This will be his last season in Columbia. DeCarrion Joyner, who's moved to running back, can play receiver, but he'll play running back for you. Marion Brown's a senior. Xavier Leggett is a senior and could move on after this season. Even Peyton Mangrum, who's a really good special teams player and plays some receiver for you, he's an upperclassman. Eddie Lewis arrives as a grad transfer, so he's obviously in his last season. Once those guys move on this season, now you're on to the next crop of, okay, well, who's going to step up? Because there's not going to be a lot of guys on this roster that have actually played a ton. There'll be some guys that have taken some snaps, some youngsters. There'll be some guys from the 2023 class. Elijah Caldwell, who we'll probably see this year. Nick Harbor, who we'll probably see this year. Tyshawn Russell was signed last year. But the point is, it's kind of going to be an open-ended question of, well, what's the rotation look like? Who are the starters? And so I think this has been a critical class to land some guys who will be able to come in and play early next year, after next year being 2024. Mazio Bennett's in the class. You need to add him, but you also need to add a couple other impact guys. And I have a feeling Wes will be, tracking some options in the transfer portal too.
Yeah, I think if you kind of start to get ahead of yourself on that, you start looking at what this roster is going to look like moving forward. Certainly transfer portal at receiver. And you can find receivers in the portal. I think that's a position that, there's usually a lot of guys who can play that are in the portal. So they should be in a position to get out and do that. But I think obviously you kind of had to flip the room a little bit by going heavy portal for a stretch there. Now you're really hoping you can get guys, obviously, like Mazio Bennett, who's verbally committed, Paylor, who you consider a lean. You're hoping you can get guys like that can come in and stay in your program, for a number of years as high school guys. And, I think for Carolina moving forward, we'll see what that looks like. Actually, Chris, before we go to break, do you want to give a little quick update on Keelan Adams as well?
Yeah, so Keelan Adams is another, 4-star wideout that Carolina's been heavily recruiting. And the Gamecocks have been in a good position. He was on campus in June, earlier this month, hanging out with Dante Reno, hanging out with Mazio Bennett. And things have looked quite good for South Carolina. That was actually an unofficial visit. Has not burned his official visit to USC. The expectation's been he'll take it during the season. He took an official visit to Bama, and even after that, that was something we knew he wanted to do before he closed out his recruitment. Right now, he's got a July 13th tentative commitment date, or probably not even tentative. That's kind of what he's planning on. The interesting thing is it's been Virginia Tech who has appeared to make a big push. He's from the state of Virginia. He was there over the weekend for an official visit, and it looks like this one, we're still kind of gathering info, but at a minimum, South Carolina looks to be locked in more of a battle than was anticipated maybe a couple weeks ago. So a guy that the staff likes a lot, they'd love to add to the class. I think we'll need, to kind of see where it lands here in the next few days, but they appear to be in a little bit more of a battle than they were, a week ago or so.
And another guy to keep an eye on there with Keelan Adams, as well as Jonathan Paylor, who is set to announce his commitment 1 month from today on July the 28th. Coming up next, the NCAA handed out some new rules to its member institutions yesterday, and I have a feeling this is going to get pretty messy. Talk about that next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5 The Game.
Takeover Hour, 107.5 The Game.
Hey, any parents out there like me, you know that you would do absolutely anything for your children, for your family. And so that's why it's so important to protect them with life insurance from State Farm. If you want some more information on how to protect your family with life insurance, what are your options? What are the costs? What is best for you and your family? State Farm agent Amy Mason-Cup can help make it easy and affordable to protect your family. You can visit her website, AmyMasonCup.com. That's AmyMasonCupp.com. She's right here in the Midlands, right off of the St. Andrews Road exit, I-26, 612 St. Andrews Road, Suite 4 in Columbia. That's just off I-26. If you know where Ashland Park Plaza is, right off St. Andrews Road, very close to the exit there. Go pay her a visit her website, or give her a call, 803-772-5554. My family trusts Amy Mason-Cup State Farm to handle our insurance needs. When we were looking to switch and save, if we ever have insurance questions, we just call her, we meet her. She and her team are great. They'll give you a personalized quote to help meet your needs and to help you save, and most importantly, to help protect your family with life insurance. If you have questions about any other insurance products, not just life insurance, they can do all the other ones too. Home, auto, boat, business, renters. Check them out, AmyMasonCup.com. Give her a call, 803-772-5554. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
New NCAA NIL rules. We'll break them down next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head, on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you in the Herndon Chevrolet studios. As I mentioned before the break there, yesterday afternoon, the NCAA sent out a memo to its member institutions in reference to some new rules that they have regarding NIL, particularly in light of certain states introducing new laws that might benefit some universities in the way they go about, I don't want to say incentivizing people to give into NILs, but there's a lot to unpack here. Dan Murphy of ESPN put together a little 2-minute clip here for SportsCenter yesterday that does a really good job of explaining everything, and we'll play that in just a second because it kind of lays it all out. He also has some quotes in there from Todd Buckley, who is an executive with the NCAA, as well as Ross Bjork, who is the current athletic director at Texas A&M. So here is what Dan Murphy had yesterday that kind of lays all this out.
The NCAA is pushing back on a number of new, innovative methods schools are using to help give their athletes an upper hand in making money through endorsement deals. The national office sent a letter to schools Tuesday saying that even where state laws allow the schools to get involved in certain NIL activities, the NCAA plans to punish schools for doing so.
It's important to remember that the NCAA and the conferences are voluntary organizations, and the volunteers set the rules for those organizations. The national office is required to enforce those rules. So until a member of this volunteer organization, makes those changes, the national office staff will continue to enforce the rules that are on the books.
In Texas, for example, a law set to go into effect on July 1st says its schools can offer perks like priority seating at home games to fans who donate to NIL funds that support the school's athletes. The NCAA says this isn't allowed, which leaves athletic directors like Texas A&M's Ross Bjork to choose between maximizing what the state law allows and following NCAA guidance.
The state law is going to govern, how we do business. And so we're going to follow the state law. We're going to make sure we're compliant. Of course, we'll continue to communicate with the NCAA on a variety of matters. But in terms of this, the state law will reign.
Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri are all among states that have recently passed similar laws. Bjork, who spoke to ESPN before Tuesday's letter was released, said he expects other schools will be pushing their state legislators to keep up with the competition.
When I spoke to Tim Buckley at the NCAA earlier this week, he emphasized that these state laws say schools can offer perks, not that they have to. So the NCAA isn't asking schools to willfully break state laws. However, they are saying that the schools aren't allowed to take full advantage of everything the law permits. Buckley added that conflicts like these are the reason why the NCAA is currently pushing Congress to create a federal uniform law that addresses many of these issues.
And again, that was done by Dan Murphy of ESPN for SportsCenter yesterday, and there's a lot to unpack from that. It's all kind of a mess at this point, and I feel like this is just going to lead to more lawsuits at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's probably what it's going to come down to. But somebody's going to have to move first, and it's probably going to have to be the NCAA in actually enforcing some of these rules. Now, they've sent out a lot of these memos that are called guidance or updated guidance, or it's always kind of these, hey, here's just a reminder, guys. Here's what we should be doing. What we have not seen adjacent to NIL yet is a big enforcement push by the NCAA. And that's been, if you just make it as simple as rules infractions, so the whole pay-for-play thing.
Sure.
That's illegal on the NCAA front, according to their rules. We haven't seen a lot of cases. We've heard they're really gearing up. They're really going to do it, and maybe they do at some point, but they have not yet. And so schools see that. The NCAA actually makes a decent point here, not to give them too much credit, but this is a voluntary organization. So sometimes you see not NIL rules, but other rules, you see universities complaining about them. And it's like, well, y'all are the ones that could actually lobby and y'all could actually change the rules, and you're actually signing off on some of these things you're complaining about. So at that level, make a push to do it. But what they found easier is, let's just go change the state law. And universities have been very involved in the process of, A, getting NIL laws on the books for states, B, actually getting some of them suspended at the state level so that they can go and kind of do what they want. Bjork's comments are really funny because I saw Dan Wolkin point out on Twitter, he's like, if the Texas legislature passed a law that said the Aggies are up 14-0 to start every game, like, is that what they're going to do? And it's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but this is kind of where we're at. That's not the example to start the game is not realistic, but we do have a situation where member organizations are now kind of in a way creating their own laws to work outside. And so we'll see where it goes, but what we can probably predict is that if the NCAA tries to enforce some of these things, like saying you can't give priority points to donors for tickets and suites and things like that. And the state law says otherwise, you might see some lawsuits. And the NCAA has been engulfed and spent lots of money on lawsuits lately.
They don't have the best track record when it comes to winning a lot of those lawsuits either.
They have not.
And more to come, obviously, yeah. I think. And I see a new story every day about the EA video game, it seems like, as far as new possible lawsuits involved there. But it kind of seemed like, and I do think the way ESPN framed it, it sounded like Bjork basically heard the memo and was like, we're going to do whatever we want anyway. Yeah. That is what he was saying, but then they went on to say he actually made those comments before that particular memo was sent out. So it wasn't quite a direct just, hey, we see this memo, but we don't care.
But you're right. But this was not the invention of this idea by the NCAA. They've actually said, not their original guidance, one of their pieces of guidance that they've sent out already said you can't give priority points and things like that. So this was another one of their reminders. There were a few new things in this memo, but they've been saying, hey, you can't give perks, basically. That's not the exact word they used. But what is that? Does it have to have a monetary value? Is it only suites, tickets, or do priority points have a monetary value? These are things they might go argue in court.
And I imagine because, they said the Texas law is set to go into effect on July 1st, which is Saturday, but Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri already have these laws in place. And I imagine each state words it differently, which creates a whole nother matter.
Well, and Mitt Winter, who's an attorney at Kenny Hertz Perry, very involved with NIL matters, represents, a lot of collectives. He pointed out the NCAA has not come after anyone, including Arkansas, who's one of the earliest to award priority points, meaning, again, to go back and kind of explain it, hey, you join an NIL collective that supports Arkansas, we're going to give you some priority points towards your tickets and your athletic events. So it incentivizes people to give to a collective or to join a collective. Arkansas changed their state law to allow that, despite what the NCAA says. Yeah. And they so far have not come after Arkansas. So again, it goes to, you can send out all the memos you want, but you do have to take some type of action. Will they at least attempt to take that action? We don't know yet. Until they do, you're probably going to see more states, more universities say, actually, y'all keep saying that and we're just going to do what we want.
Well, the timing is not a coincidence when you think of collectives that are going to be raking in the most money around the entire country. Some of the biggest ones are in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Texas, you look at Texas A&M, Missouri and Arkansas. There's some kind of Midwest theme here for some reason.
Sure.
But you'll probably see this. I mean, it is a copycat business in college athletics. There's a snowball effect. And we saw it even at the beginning of NIL in the summer of 2021, where certain states started to pass, hey, they're not addressing NIL, we're going to make our own state law. That's how this whole thing started. If a state would not have moved and done that, we'd still be sitting in an era where athletes weren't able to monetize their NIL. The NCAA wouldn't have addressed it. They wouldn't have done anything. So schools and states have seen fit to put matters in their own hands when they see a problem. Doesn't mean they've always handled it perfectly, but that's how they've done it. And the NCAA, either because of an unwillingness or just some type of, they're not able to address it, they have been kind of powerless so far to stop it, to try to stop it. And so we'll see where it goes. It's going to be, this thing gets more and more interesting by the day, kind of the clash between the NCAA and its member institutions.
Yeah, it's definitely going to get messy, something to keep an eye on as time goes along. We will come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, 107.5 The Game.
Hey guys, if you're looking for a unique gift for a sports fan in your life, we've been telling you for really a couple months now, we got a great idea for you. Look no further than our friends at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia, South Carolina. Owner Kendall Walsh
Manager Joni James, they can take care of you and they can take care of any and all of your custom framing needs. That could be a diploma if you've got a recent graduate in your life, but that could also be original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags. Maybe you've got an autographed print that you want to get a great custom frame for, then hang it in the man cave. Goldline Framing can handle any and all that for you. They've been in business for over 20 years. They're over at 511 12th Street, again, West Columbia. On campus there, they got an art gallery, they got home decor, they got furniture, gift items, pretty much anything else you can think of. 803-739-1337 is the phone number if you have any questions. They're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also, check them out on Instagram. That is at Goldline Framing SC. Again, Goldline Framing, that's in Columbia, South Carolina, 511 12th Street, West Columbia.
All right, up next, we did learn some sad news yesterday about a former quarterback in the SEC. We'll talk about that next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head, on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
Look at this. They're going to let Ryan Mallett, he's going to take a shotgun snap. They're going to put one up. Mallett in the pocket. Throws it up over the top. Right on the button. Watch out. It's a breakaway. Kobe Hamilton. 10-5. Can you believe it? Unbelievable.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler West and Chris along with you for a few more minutes. That was from CBS Sports all the way back in 2010. Ryan Mallett throwing a touchdown to wide receiver Colby Hamilton against LSU, a game that the Arkansas Razorbacks would go on to win. As I mentioned before the break there, we did learn the sad news yesterday that Ryan Mallett had passed away after drowning down in Destin, Florida. He was 35 years old. Of course, did play at Arkansas for a couple seasons after transferring from the University of Michigan. Did go on to have a lengthy NFL career with stops in New England, Houston, and most recently Baltimore. And he had most recently been coaching high school football. He had taken over as the head coach at Whitehall High School out in Arkansas, where he was getting set to coach his second season here in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, obviously super sad news, and way too young to have lost Mallett. When I first sort of heard the news, I was like instantly transported back in time and watching this. So Mallett was at Arkansas sort of right at the beginning, like right at the cusp of when Spurrier kind of started to get the South Carolina program and team rolling. And I just remember that would have been the 2009 and 2010 South Carolina teams. The 10 team, of course, represented the East in the SEC championship game. But I remember both those years watching Mallett just absolutely carve two of, at the time, two of the better South Carolina defenses, certainly that 2010 group. Two of the better defenses I've seen South Carolina have, and Mallett just absolutely in that Petrino offense carved them up. Until this happened, I had legitimately forgotten that he actually started his career at Michigan and then transferred to Arkansas, I believe after Michigan hired Rich Rod, which would have just not been a fit for what he was as a player. But he and Petrino were a great fit together. Just honestly, one of the strongest arms I've ever seen in person. I remember, his big frame just sitting back there, and it just felt like he was throwing over the South Carolina defensive line time and time again. And I also, for whatever reason, weird things just pop in your brain. I remember him just crushing South Carolina at home in 2010, and that being when Jadeveon Clowney was on campus for his official visit, and people freaking out because Arkansas had kind of humbled South Carolina with, during that Clowney visit.
44 for 57 for 632 yards combined in 2009 and 2010 for Mallett. Went over 300 yards in both games. Crazy strong arm. Actually, Josh Allen has the NFL scouting combine record for miles per hour in terms of ball velocity, 62 miles an hour. They typically say the NFL is in the 50s is kind of what you need. Josh Allen, of course, has an incredibly strong arm. I think Mallett was like 58, which was like an outlier. There was a sports science segment on him that they did. Great little show. They had him at 68. And I saw Josh Hemholt from Rivals tweeted out something, a story I'd forgotten about. When Ryan Mallett was coming out of high school, he went to a camp and was throwing to receivers, and he literally ripped a receiver's gloves. He threw the ball so hard. So he was a crazy talent.
And one thing, just in digging through stuff about him yesterday, I'd forgotten he was 7th in Heisman voting in 2010, the year that Cam Newton obviously won the Heisman, but very well regarded quarterback.
He and Petrino together, that was a tough combo, that offense with his talent.
Absolutely. So obviously thoughts and prayers going out to family, friends, and as well as his players at Whitehall High School out there in Arkansas who are now without their coach, very, very close to the start of this season. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Jay and Terry. Coming up next on 107.5 The Game.